everybody, it's Carrie with Seed to Spoon. Thank you so much for joining us today on our podcast, Why We Grow. And today we had the honor of meeting with Gary with The Rusted Garden. And he is somebody that Dale and I have been watching on YouTube since before we were even gardening. He was one of the very first ones that motivated us to even get started. So just talking with him today was truly an incredible experience. I hope that you all will enjoy this conversation as much as we did.
All right. Hey, everybody. We are here with Gary from The Rusted Garden. And Gary is actually one of the first YouTube channels that we found whenever we first started gardening. I don't know if I told you that, Gary. I think I did on our podcast that we recorded on your podcast.
I remember. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Your channel, whenever I get obsessed with something, I start binging. And we found a lot of channels. And I was drawn to yours just because of the way that you talk about things. And growing up, I hope you appreciate this remark I'm about to make. But growing up, I was a big Bob Newhart fan. I almost feel like watching your channel was almost like Bob Newhart for gardening in a way, where it was kind of that same kind of demeanor of just chill. Like that's why I like the show, because it was just like laid back but witty, and you learn stuff. And it was just kind of, like that was kind of how I felt about your channel. Was it was just like the place I went to just to learn a lot of stuff, and it was always chill and laid back. And whenever I started making videos, I think Carrie always said that it seemed like I was making videos in kind of the same way you did. Mm-hmm. I gravitated towards that style of just trying to be a place people could go in the world just to chill and learn some gardening stuff, and just, no drama. You're not ranting about anything. You're not getting stressed or worked out about anything. It was just kind of how the Bob Newhart show was for me as a kid, where it was kind of the opposite. Like I love Taxi too, so it was kind of the opposite of that, because I love kind of the craziness of Andy Kaufman. So it was kind of the balance.
So, I appreciate it, yeah.
So Gary, I'm really happy and excited to have you on the show today and to learn more about your story in gardening, and to how learn more about that backstory. So let's start off just by asking, how did you get started in gardening? Like, where did you start? Like, what was your beginning in all this?
So, the beginning really started that my grandfather used to come over with a bag of tomatoes. It was an old brown bag, 6-pack of tomato plants, a blue tin of lime, which he called sweetener. And he just would plant our garden. And that I kind of caught the bug for it from there. It was like really cool. You could grow all kinds of stuff. And that's kind of what sparked the passion. And then, of course, as a kid, you don't want to weed, you don't want to take care of it, but it stayed with me. And kind of going backwards from today, 20 years ago, we got a house, we finally had some property, and I started gardening on there. And it was just enjoyable. Everything that I remember as a kid came back, starting growing. And I just really did it to relax. I am retired now from my mental therapist job, or mental health clinical therapist. I did that for 20 years. So kind of got married, had kids, moved to a place with land, got everything going, had a mental health career. It can be somewhat, not really stressful, but a lot going on with, working with people. And gardening was just a way to kind of mentally just take a break and enjoy what was around. And it all kind of started from there. So in 2011-ish, I started a YouTube channel, made some really, which I consider lame videos, but I found I loved connecting with gardeners. So combination of liking to grow food, my grandfather, chatting with gardeners, it kind of developed over the last 10 years where I could retire and kind of do my YouTube channel now, which I'm greatly appreciative of. I just love watching plants grow. I love talking with people. I won't get too much on the soapbox, but around the globe, no matter what country, what flag, what religion, whatever you are, gardeners are all the same. They want to know, why is this insect killing my plant? How can I get my tomatoes to grow better? And it's just like this common theme that's kind of in all human beings. And that kind of stuff, intrigues me. But mostly I love just watching stuff grow.
I love that. I think that's one of the things I love about gardening, is you can connect with people across all different cultures. You can learn so much from different cultures about even the same plants. Maybe plants like cilantro that in the States here, I think we really only use it as the leaf, right? But across the world, they're more oftentimes using the seed, the coriander seed and things like that. So I think there's a lot of different examples of ways that you can better learn how to do all this just by communicating across that common language of gardening. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. I also think too that, I think sometimes people talk about miracles and all that kind of stuff. In a cool kind of way, I can hold in my hand 20 or 30,000 pounds of food in the way of a seed, or I can plant my entire garden. Like, if that's not a miracle of life, I don't really know what is. So taking those seeds, deciding where they go, kind of how to create a garden, edible landscape, and, kind of be an earth artist or whatever. Anybody can do that. And you can grow food, and you can, create trellises, and you can create really cool interactions with the fruits, the vegetables, the flowers, and stuff like that. But you can literally hold your whole garden in your hand. And once you plant it, it just goes out of control. And that's the point. That's the part I love watching. It's just to go from sort of the brown earth canvas to all that green, lush growth. You share it with family and friends. You get to talk about it. I get to use it in videos. But it just becomes a kind of a good part of life, not all this. You got to have a job, of course, I get it. And you just need more though than to wake up, go to a job, come home, wake up, go to a job, come home. So if you can integrate gardening and sort of homesteading and bits and pieces into your lifestyle, I think it's really just rewarding.
Absolutely. And I love that you have a mental health background too, because that's actually the first reason why we started growing our own food, was to help with mental health.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think a lot of the things that you talk about with being aware of, I think a big part of mental health that I found for me is trying to have more awareness of the positives and of the magic of life. Like you mentioned, the seed that can have 20,000 pounds of food in one, and just seeing those first sprouts of green in the spring after the long dead of winter, and just being appreciative of those things. That lifestyle change has really helped me. That was why we got into gardening, was to, I spent all of my time on a computer before then, and I needed that balance of time in the physical world and appreciation for this magical place we live in, and I think gardening helps connect me to that, and your channel helped me connect to those ideas too, because I think you do a good job of talking about that kind of stuff. And I definitely highly recommend Gary's channel if you get stressed out and you just want to chill and just watch some gardening stuff. It's my go-to channel for where I go for that in the gardening world. Nowadays, it's mostly fishing videos, but when I do want to watch some gardening stuff, I'm checking out Gary's stuff to see what he's got going on.
I mean, I think that's so important. Sometimes we don't know how we get into a sort of a way of life or a way of thinking of things. Like, you were at a computer all the time, and there's nothing wrong with it. But sometimes then you sacrifice that outdoor part or that interaction with nature. And a lot of us just don't know that we're missing that. There's a lot more to a structure and routine to strengthen your mental health and your wellness. I'm not talking about major mental illnesses. We all have different degrees of anxiety and depression, moods, changes, all that kind of stuff. You don't need a diagnosis to say gardening's going to benefit you. You can have a great life, but sometimes you add in gardening, it's even better than you thought it was. Like, it just adds to that. And a little bit kind of what you were saying is it just changes your routine a little bit. It really gets your head out of your head so that you can kind of look and say, all right, I got job responsibilities and stuff, but let me go take care of these radishes because I know what they're going to be like in about 4 weeks. Sounds silly, but it's a good silly. So I really always encourage people to get started and grow something.
So you started your YouTube channel in 2011, you said?
Yeah, around there.
Okay. Well, what got you to start to do that?
So I'm lucky enough that I'm older and wiser. But when I started high school, the first computer came in. The first, I guess it was an Apple or whatever the first computer was. So I was able to see that and really took interest in what computers are. And then, YouTube came out. So I got to see all that. And I thought, you know what? Let's just try and do a YouTube video. And it was kind of maybe terrible or maybe stiff, but I was like, I've been away on vacation and now it's time to tend the garden. And after I said that and watched, I'm like, who says that? you know, like why am I saying that? And that kind of got me to my style of just how's everybody doing kind of, or let's just get started. And this is what we're going to learn today. Take it easy. Here's the facts. Go back out to your garden. So I got to develop a style, but I did it just to see, you know, if I could do it. I'm like, oh, what is this YouTube? Let me try it. And there were millions of tomato videos out there and millions of such and such out there on gardening. And I thought, let me just see what I can do. So I do want to encourage anybody who's starting a YouTube channel just to make content and be comfortable with it. Be yourself. And probably I started in 2010, but didn't really start making content maybe to later into 2012, 2013. But stick with it, because I remember when I was making like, you know, 3 cents a day, and I was like calculating, well, that's about $4 a month. If I can double that and then double that again, I could be getting $60, $80 to buy supplies for the garden. And a lot of us are on a budget, but
Yeah.
you know, and it just kind of grew and took off. And I also found it relaxing. Like it's relaxing for me to go out and just talk about what's going on. And over the 10 years, I've become more comfortable just, you know, being myself, but really sharing what the garden is. And hopefully that's starting to come through more and more in the videos. But I just decided to try it. To answer your question, I said, let's give it a try and see what happens.
That's awesome. So you said you started growing your food again whenever you got some land. All that. What was one of the first things you started?
So it was always been tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers.
Yeah.
Every summer, what I'm waiting for, aside from radishes and peas, but getting into the warm crops, is making that tomato, cucumber, and onion salad. You know, I have to use onions unless I'm growing them. But the fresh tomato, the fresh cucumbers, slice the cucumbers really, you know, thinly, chunk up the tomatoes, different colors, vinegar, red vinegar, oil, some oregano out of the garden is even better, salt, pepper, and like I can eat just bowls of that. And that goes all the way back to, you know, my grandfather, my mom having that made. That's what we did. So that's what I look forward to. So that's what I started growing first. And then I expanded into all kinds of different things. And, you know, fast forward 10 years, I'm kind of hauling back what I'm growing and growing more of what I enjoy and that I'm going to eat or that I can store and et cetera. So I have a lot of garden, but right now I even have empty beds, which is unheard of for me because I usually have 12 zucchini plants, but I don't need 12 zucchini plants. So keeping 2 plants, which I did last year, they produced like 6 because I could keep the diseases off them. I could keep the pests off of them. And I didn't have to be, you know, running around managing more plants than I really needed.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Like
Yeah.
keeping it manageable.
I think we did the same thing with zucchini, where the first year we only had a couple plants and we got a lot of it, but we got greedy and we thought, well, let's plant
We
more.
got super excited.
Mhm.
Planted a whole bunch, and then it was just a war
It was
against
chaos.
the zucchini bugs, and we lost bad. And now we're kind of back to doing 1 or 2, and then also doing like rotational for every 3 to 4
we
weeks.
started with 1 zucchini plant, and then we a couple weeks later we planted some more, so that way we can kind of have it all
kind of
around.
putting them all around the garden.
Yeah.
And just hoping that, and then being are the best we can about checking for squash bugs. We're doing a good job so far.
Yeah.
And this maybe is going to make it where we aren't taking any vacations anytime soon. So I think this year we got to change.
Yeah, that's usually whenever we have issues.
That first vacation.
Taking vacations in the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually told my wife, like we would try to go to the beach. I said, you know what? No more summer vacations for me. I can do up through March. Well, let's say March, April, and then late September on. Because if I go away a week and I come back, everything's out of control. And then it's 3 weeks to catch up to that. I have a tip for squash bugs. I just did a watering video. If you spray water, use a spray nozzle right at the base of your zucchini or squash or related. Just, water, deep soaking. Any squash bugs that are around there that you can't see will climb up to the top of the plant, and then you can squash and kill them. I don't know if you do that, but I've probably killed about 15 now in making this video and going to these different plants. So the sooner you can kill them that way, the less you get those, kind of orange eggs on the underside and stuff like
That's a great tip.
That's awesome. Okay, now I want to go out to the garden and go do this.
We haven't had any squash bugs yet.
Knock on wood.
I know.
I know.
Give the base a good soak and see what happens. And I just wanted to say your rotation or your kind of staggered planting is a great idea. I talk about that a lot too, because you're going to get a lot first couple of plants because the squash bugs didn't really come in, the vine borer's not around. And then you may lose some plants, but then again, if you plant again, even late July, you're still going to get squash and zucchini, or late August, you're still going to get. So you just stagger the planting and you plant around all the problems of the pests and diseases that come in your area, rather than having like 5,000 pounds of zucchini and
Yes.
squash at one time.
Yep, exactly. And that's one of the fun things about gardening too, is I think when we first started, it was like a big weekend event where we tried to plant the whole garden, but now it's not like that. We plant, a little bit here, a little bit there. Every day we're planting a little bit extra, something new. So it doesn't have the same, you don't have to look at it as though you have to plant all this thing at once. You can just plant sporadically. I think square foot gardening helps with that too, because then you can divide your 4x8 bed up into 32 plots. And now you can think about those individually if you want. I think we try and view each smart pot as its own, because we have a lot of those the round raised bed smart pots, the 4-foot ones. So we just view them as their own little garden and just plant those out basically.
Yeah.
And we're always rotating around. And then if you have a plant that doesn't make it, then it's not as big of a deal. It's just, well, now I've got an opening for something new.
Yeah.
So,
but before it would be devastating.
You grow a lot of the grow bags too, right, Gary?
Say that again.
You grow in a lot of the grow bags too, right?
Yeah, I grow in the fabric pots, certainly, containers, raised beds, earth beds. And I mean, my garden's kind of sort of eclectic because I like the look, number one, but I also use it as a teaching space so that I can, say kind of what you were kind of alluding to. It's like, everybody, you don't need a garden this big. You don't have to plant it all like this. Look at different parts. But kind of your attitude where you just said, if something doesn't do well, that's an opportunity for a new plant versus it being a failure. And we all go through that. And, there's so many like bad metaphors for gardening that really do well in life. But that is one of them, like sometimes it doesn't work out, so what can you do next? And then you forget about that crop that failed and you find joy in what you've planted and what's going on. And it's really a way to kind of stay sort of, I think, in the moment, or staying focused on a, positive task, and then also kind of thinking what's going to happen down the line. And you're learning at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that about your channel, Gary. You help steer people towards that line of thinking. I think that's so important. I think people that start out with a 4x4 garden and they bet everything on one tomato and one pepper and maybe a handful of other things, and then it goes wrong, and then they give up on gardening. Whereas if you look at it differently, I think it helps with keeping people sustained doing it.
Yeah, and it's a learning curve. I mean, I always say that, a garden wants to give. You just have to help it along. You just can't get down if it doesn't go well. Like, there's no way. Like, the other thing, and I don't know if like when you got started, but sometimes a lot of us who are starting something new, we want to watch, a dozen videos and read 6 or 7 articles. And at some point we're becoming stuck because we just have to say, all right, we watched 2 videos, got some knowledge, get out in the garden and do it and see what happens. That's the only way really to learn. You just can't be afraid to have it not work out, because even on a failure, you still can get tomato plants. It might be diseased, leaves, but you get plenty of tomatoes. Stick with it.
So did you get all of your gardening knowledge from your grandfather then?
So I got the inspiration, and he made me feel confident that I can plant stuff without having to worry about it. So it would be like, here's the tomatoes, dig the hole. Well, we would turn the soil, dig the hole, throw in some of this, drop in the plant. Here's the cucumbers, push them down about 1 inch, walk away, water them in. So he gave me the confidence that it didn't have to be super complicated. I mean, I don't know how much time we have, but I love talking about this. We overcomplicate fertilizing now. We call it like maximum nutrition, or plants need maximum hydration. We get into all these silly terms that you see everywhere. But it's sun, earth, water, fertilizer. compost and stuff like that. And then you can get into like, do I put in, 5% nitrogen here at planting and then give it 10% more nitrogen in some sort of form at mid-growth? And when do I throw in the potassium? We can get so bogged down in all of this kind of commercialization of organic gardening and specialty products that it takes the fun out of it. And it's so darn expensive. Like, you just don't need to spend money beyond seeds, maybe something to help prep your soil, and some sort of basic inexpensive fertilizer. And that's the other thing I try and convey to people is you don't have to be like, I don't know, you kill your plants with too much TLC. You can do more harm by hovering over them and giving them too much stuff than versus just let them go and do their thing.
Oh, for sure.
Being a helicopter parent.
Our
Yeah.
first year garden was definitely like that. Yeah. I think with watering, especially, people tend to overwater.
Yes.
And that's one of the
and then
biggest
you have
reasons.
the shallow roots.
Especially with something like rosemary. It's just not going to handle it. That's one of the biggest mistakes I see people make.
Well, that's right. So were you growing rosemary in containers? So like there are a few plants, rosemary, thyme, lavender. Certain plants don't like a lot of water. Other plants you probably have to water more than you thought, like when the tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, squash, zucchini get larger in containers or in the earth. So that gets to be overwhelming to people too. Because the number one question I was just saying I always get is, how often do I need to water? And the answer, without being smart, is when your plants need it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to learn about the needs of the plant, like rosemary or lavender. And then based on the plant size, the temperatures, there's a third one, which will come to me in a second, and just real rainfall. That kind of impacts how often you water. But, you can kind of stick to 3 times a week and get by. You don't have to over worry about it. If 3 times a week doesn't work, then you should have probably done it 4 times. Or if 3 times a week isn't working because plants look bad, then you cut it back. But there's no way that you can learn without doing, and again, you have to do it. Because when you guys are talking, I can hear how you started, what you learned, and how you do things differently, all within the same, couple of sentences, which is what's going to happen with all people.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the watering algorithm, that's one of the things we've been working on as a team, is trying to figure out the best way to build an algorithm to send notifications to people to tell them when to water based on the last time it rained, where they are, and all that kind of thing. So it gets very complex, and trying to figure out evaporation rates, and there's humidity that goes into it. And yeah.
Lots of math.
Yes. It's been fun trying to figure out how we're going to do that. So
if you figure it out, let me know, because that might be one thing where it's the gardener's experience, where they just have to look at it. Because then you got to throw in, is it mulched?
yes.
Then some people say, well, I use drip irrigation, which is different than a soaker hose, which is different than a soaker hose that covers all of your garden versus just dripping water into the base of the plant. And it just gets really complicated. So
I think what we landed on is we're going to do our best at an attempt to say, and the alert's going to say, there's a good chance your plants need water, go check them. And if you go out there and it's still and it's dry, I mean, it doesn't need water, then you can snooze it basically for another day.
Well, I just have to say this one thing, then we'll get to the topic. But if you really use the next 6 days, it's going to be 90 degrees and no rain. That's probably a good marker for people to say, I need to increase the watering now to every other day and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
All right, new subject. Sorry.
No, I'm excited to talk to you
Watering
about
is
the watering
important.
algorithm. That could be another podcast we start, just all about watering algorithms.
Well, yeah, fertilizing too, because you see a lot of people say use compost. Compost is free. Compost is good for the environment. Compost is good. It is. It's the king or queen of feeding your plants. However, a lot of people can't make it, or they don't have the room for it. So you can't really teach about gardening and tell people there's only one way to do it. So if you can get to more compost and you can make your own, that's wonderful. But then you can also get into, do I fertilize at the end of the year? Do I fertilize at the beginning of the year? Do I put in the organic granular fertilizer? Or which one do I use? Or this one has a really fancy packaging. And that's my other soapbox, is that when you're buying organic granular fertilizer, the dry stuff. It's a slow release fertilizer. It's usually made of blood meal, bone meal, chicken manure. They throw in a couple other things, but just about all of them are the same. So if you get caught into fancy packaging with all these catchphrases and stuff like that, you're just spending more money. There's no such thing as an heirloom tomato fertilizer, which you will see next to a fertilizer that says tomatoes, next to one that says leafy green, next to one that says fruits, next to one that says for peppers, next to one that says all purpose, next to one that says blooms. Like you'll see all of these different fertilizers. And you can really just pick whatever's the cheapest. Your plants are going to be okay, where you don't have to worry about all of that. If you want to down the line, that's fine, but don't. I guess my biggest issue is that becomes a barrier to people because they get frozen with, well, how am I going to feed my plants and stuff like that? So
what we tell people is like what we do is we make just our own bulk fertilizer, which is basically the Espoma recipe. But I know there's a lot of people out there that don't want to have to do all that. They'd rather just buy the bag. So I tell them, if you have a small garden and you're just getting started, just buy the Espoma. And then if you want to make it yourself, then just look at the back of the Espoma and go buy all those ingredients in bulk at your local organic gardening store.
Right.
And just mix them inside of a 55-gallon barrel. But you're going to get really messy and you're going to smell bad for a little bit. So you're going to need a few showers afterwards. Because like that blood meal and stuff and that bone meal, like it gets all up on you. Like I smell so bad after I make that. But you save a lot of money for sure.
Yeah. And Espoma is a good one because it's fairly priced for the convenience. So I actually recommend that too. So it's not bad.
And they don't have like a million different options, but they do have like the tomato flavored, the one that's more for tomatoes where it's not as much nitrogen so that you don't, and they have the berry tone and they have a couple others. So that's usually that's one that we always recommend. And the one that if we're going to buy it, we buy that one, but I'm a dork and like to make my own. So I'm like always experimenting with, should I do feather mill or if it's fish mill or all the extra fish we catch, we turn into fertilizer. That's a gross process. So,
well, So I like, so I buy what's on sale. So I don't remember how harsh a winters you guys get, but on the East Coast, we get really, freezing winters with lots of snow. Every year, December, January, stuff goes on sale. So I got 70 22-pound bags of Espoma fertilizer.
Nice.
For $1 a bag.
Oh my gosh.
Way.
Wow.
So, I mean, I donated it, to the farm that I volunteer at, kept some of it for myself. But that's the point, is that you can kind of look around and find what's cheap. Because I like doing kind of what you're doing, where I might find something's on clearance and it might be like a 266 and I blend it with like a 7-3-3, and I start making ratios that are more balanced. And, for people that are listening, the numbers are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So if you can get like a fertilizer that's around a 5-5-5, that's like a decently balanced fertilizer. But when you get more experience, you can kind of cut back, like you're saying, on a fertilizer with less nitrogen and more phosphorus and potassium for peppers or for tomatoes. But it just becomes such a barrier that people really kind of freeze up. Because years ago, before organic became commercialized, you could get a 50-pound bag of blood meal and bone meal because it was used for feeding animals for like $20. It was ridiculous. Now you have to pay like
$100.
Like $8 for like 3 pounds or something like that. So it kind of just shifted how people were buying it.
Yeah, it cost us $600 to make our last batch of organic fertilizer. That was like a 50-pound bag of blood meal, bone meal, feather mill, fish. Like it was probably 5 different things. Each bag was about $100. It was shocking how much it's gone up.
Yeah. And it's because
look out for that deal that you mentioned for this, because that'd be cheaper to buy 20 bags of Espoma and empty that in our 55.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It really is. So like hit Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart December-ish, January-ish, because the weird thing is they sold their Espoma out, but then they brought the same Espoma back because it was just on that cycle. And I'm like, all right. I was like,
yeah, expiration dates, because we carry it in our store, and that's one of those items that we have expiration dates on.
Yeah.
And there's shipping restrictions on that one. We just built out the whole like shipping or like in-app purchasing part of our app, so we had to learn all about that. So I know there's rules around Espoma.
Yeah.
Let's-
But does fertilizer really go bad is my question. Like
I
how worse can fish emulsion get
I'm
if it's
not
already rotted?
Go bad.
I know it's not like it's leaking out of the package, but you know how when the government gets involved, there's
Mhm.
regulations on everything, and yeah, that's for a different podcast. So,
Yep. So, but I mean, I enjoy, I mean, even I can look out my window now and just really watch how everything is changing out there, with the warm soil and the warm days, plants are almost doubling in 3 or 4 days. It's crazy. Like June is the time to watch all this accelerated growth. And I'm not sure, what your timeline is for getting your podcast out, but people have plenty of time to start a garden from scratch right now. I mean, you can start in June, you can even start in July, still grow some warm stuff, and then, grow the cool crops. I just, again, want to encourage people to kind of get started.
absolutely. I mean, we're only July is when you start your seeds indoors for the fall crop anyway. So I mean, no matter where you are, and that's one of the reasons why we built the app. So you can download the app and you can see everything we planted where you are now. So there's a lot of things we're planted all throughout summer, even here in Oklahoma where it gets really hot. Things like okra and southern peas, which are actually
I'm
beans.
still planting
but-
squashes. Like I'm still,
Mhm.
yeah. A lot of things.
Yeah. And I think the app is wonderful because it puts everything in one place, and that's part of like when I was doing videos, I wanted it to be as short as possible for people to get information, because if you start trying to find something simple sometimes, online, you can go down that rabbit hole and, 90 minutes go by, and that's your time to be outside weeding and planting and doing stuff like that. So, I definitely encourage people to, use your app, of course, but get a source that gets them the information they need, and then just learn how to use it. And your life is going to be a lot easier.
And then watch YouTube videos at night and then dream about what you're going to do the next day. Or, I mean, we've been out in the garden with those headlights before, especially when we're
That's
hunting
true.
slugs.
That's true.
You
Right.
can go out at night in the summer. The mosquitoes become the problem at
Yeah.
that point.
Bug spray.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of when I do my best thinking is like 3 a.m. if I wake up and I'm like, all right. So I start thinking about what I can plant, what I can grow, designing all the stuff for the garden, and some of it sticks, some of it disappears. But it really has become kind of an integrated part in my lifestyle. And, it's just enjoyable. So I'm happy now, I got my 2 acres and I'm sort of transforming this slowly, looking around into gardens, but also where can I create sort of edible landscapes and incorporate more edibles and stuff like that into the basic design. I mean, speaking of the government, the only thing worse than some parts of the government, not all government is bad, are homeowner associations when they don't let you do. Yeah, they don't let you do anything. You have to plant the same bush, the same thing. You can't
Oh, man.
put vegetables out. You can't do stuff in your front lawn. That's starting to change here in Maryland. There's a law now that they can't stop you from growing edible food. So it's nice to see a change. Yeah. But I think we need that kind of to sweep across so that people that are in a smaller space can go out in their front yard and they can grow in a 4x4, like you were saying earlier. What's wrong with that? You try and grow a tomato, a pepper, a cucumber, maybe some beans, but we have rules that I think prevent people from getting into gardening.
Yeah, that would be my soapbox. If I were to get on one, it would be about why are we growing all of this grass, all this grass, and spending all this money on fertilizer that's running off into the streams and killing all the fish. And that'd be my soapbox, but I'm not getting on it right now. But
Well, what's interesting though is we should just talk and start other podcasts, because that's aside from talking about the app, that bothers me too, because I was part of that. Like, I don't know how I got into it, but it was like green grass, like it's just drilled into your head. And that's capitalism is wonderful at some parts of it. Some of it's not, because we get so caught into having to have a lawn, and historically lawns were a sign of great wealth. Like when, the kings and queens and people with wealth in European countries had so much land, they could demonstrate, we don't need food. We're just going to have grass. And that was a status symbol that just stuck around and caught on. Like, I don't use any chemicals on my lawns. since I've been here now for 4 years. And it's okay. I still have really cool green grass, but sometimes I get clover, and that looks nice when it flowers. I get other stuff in there. But I can use it for compost, and I can use it for mulch, and I don't have any sprays, or I don't have any chemicals on it. And I can kind of just use that resource, and it's free. It doesn't mean I don't have to go buy everything to take care of the lawn. Then I don't have to go buy compost, and I don't have to go buy fertilizer. It's like, how did I get brainwashed?
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
When we lived in the city, one of the struggles was like your neighbor would spray stuff all over there, and then it's 2 feet away from where your garden is. There's nothing you can do. You try and explain to people that dandelions are actually a superfood. Why are you spraying poison on it? You should eat it. But they don't want to listen to that. They don't want to listen about the dandelion wine or the dandelion tea or honey or any other stuff we try and sell them on. But it's frustrating for sure. And I was just like you, where I was part of it for so long. And I think Michael Pollan is what first opened my eyes to it. In the documentary Food Inc. And then I got into some of his writings with Omnivore's Dilemma and food rules and learning about all this stuff. And it really opened my eyes to it all. And I think once you see it, you can't go back. And like we went from living in the city with a sometimes we had a perfectly manicured yard. But now it's just chickens patrol our yard. And I don't even know what's growing out there. Sometimes there's grass. The sheep mow it for me.
We have a lot of chives randomly.
But every inch of property that we have, we view as opportunity of food for either us or our animals. And I think that once you make that shift, it's just a different way of living. Completely.
Yeah.
Happier.
I agree. And it's much more interesting, and then some lawn is okay. Like there's great if you want a kind of a place that's going to be cool where you can kind of sit or kids can play. That's perfectly fine. But around here sometimes people have 3 acres of just grass, and it's like,
and no
what
sheep.
do you do with it? No sheep. Yeah. I mean, at least have something, eat it. But grass then also serves no benefit. It doesn't feed pollinators. It doesn't feed insects. It holds grubs for Japanese beetles, takes tremendous amounts of water. So there's no real value in it except for kind of what we're kind of brainwashed. I mean, it takes me back to the 70s where you had like Fruit Loops and Cocoa Puffs and everything was super sugary and sweet. And you thought that was just a great breakfast. It still is. But you get brainwashed, Same reason I think we get brainwashed. Sometimes people are afraid to garden because of the bugs and that their food's not clean. So they'd rather go to a grocery store and buy it all that way. Yeah. And that's something I come up with against a lot. It's like, what's the difference if you have small holes in your food, in your plants? That's a sign that you're probably mostly organic and there's nothing sprayed on there. But it's hard to break that cycle. I mean, it's the same thing. You get a home, you get a car, you get a bigger home, you get a bigger car. Hopefully you find someone, you get married, but then you work, you go out, you buy stuff, you work, you go out and you buy stuff, and it's rinse and repeat. And gardening's are lost skills. Like everything you guys are doing and all the people I encounter doing, even if it's just a little bit, it's kind of claiming back these old skills that we knew how to do and had to do, way back. And in many different parts of the country too. America is like the place where you can only in America in places like this, you can have people that are on 12 different diets because food sometimes isn't easy to get. So people are gardening and they're eating what's available to them. But, here we can be on all these kind of crazy diets and we can just go buy it and we can go all do this. So, and it works for a lot of people. I have nothing against that. But double check your mental health. Sometimes getting out to nature and feeling that ability to create in a garden goes a long way for your happiness.
So one thing you were talking about just a bit ago is, kind of got me thinking about garden almost as art. What was you said you were sculpting. Can you elaborate on what you're talking about, like as gardening as an art form?
Yeah. So years ago, I got to visit with P. Allen Smith, which you guys might know down where you are. A lot of people up north don't know who he is, But he has a beautiful property. And one of the things that he talked about was creating rooms outdoors. And you could see how he would move, through his property, and it would be different rooms. So when I started gardening here at the new property, which was kind of cool in itself because I had 2 acres. It's like a perfect rectangle. There's tons of sun right in the middle of the area. I got to take everything from doing this for 20 years, 30 years, all the YouTube channel stuff, and kind of start fresh. So I built my garden with that in mind. So like when you walk into my east gate, first thing you see are blueberry bushes, hops vines on the side, blackberry brambles in the back, and that's sort of the fruit room. And to the right in there is where I'm taking care of seedlings and stuff and cold frames. And then as you walk in, you turn through, you go through a big cattle panel tunnel. And right now I have blackberries growing up that, but it was 3 cherry tomatoes on each side, and it was like 8 feet. So you could walk through with a bowl, pick cherry tomatoes, and when you come out the other side, you have a full bowl of cherry tomatoes. But using the beds in a way that each turn or each angle, or from looking from different parts of your garden, you get a different view, and you sort of have these rooms inside of there is what I like. So kind of if you're watching me do tours of my garden, aside from teaching, they're set up like root pouches on the left, metal containers on the right. But that kind of flow is everywhere, so that I can walk with my coffee in the morning, feel at peace, like the space, like the decorations, like the living art that I know that I planted and created, see how it's doing. I let nature throw in sunflower seeds that fall or beans that fall, and let them do their thing. And it all kind of combines in a cool way that it's an extension of my home, and I can just walk out there and like, where are you? Well, I'm in the garden. Well, it is a garden, but it's also part of my house, sort of to speak, part of my way of life. And I know everything that's in there is something that I thought about. Like when I was saying at 3 a.m., I'm thinking, well, maybe I could use this as a trellis, or I could kind of build this. And I get to put it into practice in the garden, and each year it changes a little bit, and stuff gets moved around like furniture, and I just kind of see what happens.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's one of the things we like to do is anytime we're at a garage sale, we see some sort of an outdoor furniture type thing, we're picking that up because we're going to find a way to make a new area where we have seating. I think that's important to do, is make sure you involve plenty of seating in your garden. One thing we haven't always done in the past is we didn't really have anywhere we could just sit down and enjoy the garden. And the more that you can do that, the better you're going to spot pests and just, be aware of what's going on in your garden, because you're just enjoying it too.
Yeah, I have a bench in my garden, and actually, I'm glad you said that, because throughout my property, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 different sitting areas, 7, so that you can always see things at a different angle, and you can kind of just wander around and sit and look and contemplate, or you just could eat your dinner over there with family or something like that. You can really incorporate it. It doesn't sound crazy because I've been doing this for so long, but people are just getting started. You can really incorporate gardening into your lifestyle for all the benefits that we've been talking about. And it goes beyond just having green grass, where you look out and you got a fence and a big square of green grass. It's okay, but you can make that come alive with, sculpting it really in ways that you like. And it doesn't have to be crazy. It could just be a small garden here, a fruit tree there. It could be green beans, or you teach your kids, where food comes from. Because that's the other thing too. Why I kind of got into the YouTube channel, and I volunteer at Freetown Farm now, was to help kids learn where food comes from. Because you can actually ask kids, like, where's food come from? And the short answer is, well, grocery store. Or where do radishes grow? On trees. They just don't know. And there is so much joy, and probably relates, from when I was a kid with my grandfather, but there's so much joy when kids can go out, be in the dirt, plant seeds, they take care of it, they learn something. But when you go back with them and they start pulling out radishes and turnips and things they may not have eaten before, and green beans, they can see where it comes, but they know that they planted it and they're eating it. They just have a lot of fun. It's kind of, I think, part of our being. And we really did lose touch I think, with it as a society, in general.
Oh, for sure. We see that in our kids. We have 2 kids that have grown up in this lifestyle, and they'll walk out there and just grab some peas. They'll grab a couple leaves of lettuce. They'll grab a kale leaf, and
Anything, yeah.
that's just normal for them. And I wish that was ingrained into me, because I still fall back to the gummy worms too many times instead of thinking as the pea is the gummy worm,
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I had the Cocoa Puffs and, all those good stuff back then, or Rice Krispies that were supposed to be better because they're rice, but then you would put tons of sugar on them. So,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
still
well,
tastes good.
back then, it was fat that was the boogeyman. So
Right.
it wasn't sugar. It was make sure you didn't have any of the fats. Whereas now, we've learned the fats are good for you, especially if they're the good fats. So,
Well, I mean, that's the other thing that I want people to grow stuff. Well, one, you were saying, like, you can have some pea plants, you can have some kale, you can have some lettuce growing, maybe some spinach. Doesn't take a lot of room, but your kids can actually go out and pick a whole setup for a salad in very little space and in very little time. And that becomes a memory. There's not great memories going to a grocery store and buying stuff. But if you're out there walking with your kid, just talking, you can hear about what's going on in their life. You can, just be checking in with them. You're picking food, you bring it in, and that becomes a memory and ingrained in that child versus yelling it's dinner time. Everything's nicely put on the table, not thrown on the table from a grocery store. Just something to think about.
Yeah, and with every berry we've ever grown, the kids are fighting over who gets to eat them.
Yes.
So it's strawberries or blackberries or whatever.
Blueberries.
Mulberries.
I just ate
now.
all the blueberries, though. I didn't share with the kids. I should have. I'll share the next ones.
Yeah, we love mulberries right now too.
Yes.
More always grow, and you can always grow more. So
Yes,
it's pretty cool.
So you're out in Maryland, but you're also in Zone 7. So we have similar growing conditions. Is it a lot more humid out there? I imagine that's a big difference you have between us here.
So yeah, I mean, the zones, that's the other thing too. People always like, well, first of all, on my YouTube page, it says real big Maryland Zone 7, but people always say, what zone are you in? Or I'll say, welcome to the Rustic Garden. I'm in Maryland Zone 7, and I still get what zone you're in. Zones don't matter that much. They're only used by us and, well, North America and Canada. The rest of the world doesn't use them. We get 100% humidity. I don't know what your humidity gets up to, but in July, 90 and 100% humidity is perfectly normal. So you walk out and your clothes are sticking to you, and I'm used to it. So like the benefit is like when nobody wants to go to Florida in the summer because it's too hot, we're like, hey, yeah, let's go. It's not so bad. Well, at least when I used to travel during the summer. But we get crazy humidity. So that brings in early blight and other fungal diseases. Not uncommon to what you guys get, but I don't know what the right word is, but kind of the breeding period for all these diseases seems to be longer here because of the humidity. So it's just something you have to learn. But like you can have, I think Zone 7 is in Tennessee too. And then, there's Zone 7 across in California in different parts on the West Coast. So it doesn't really translate well to what's going on for growing,
That's one of the things we get questions about with the app is what zone is it for? And we try and explain that it's based off weather station, not necessarily zone. Right. We find the nearest weather station and calculate off of that.
It's everywhere so unique.
Yeah, with us, it's very humid this time of year. So we get a lot of rain in June. And then by the end of June, it's starting to back off. And then we're in drought conditions by, July or August. And the humidity is pretty much gone, but it's very hot. So
dry heat.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the other thing we don't get, and going back to when we were talking about watering, we can get 2 inches of rain in a thunderstorm. In fact, the storms are starting to form around here now. We get rain all the time through the whole summer. I mean, if we go through a drought, it's more rare than commonplace. So that's different too, even though it's a zone. And that I was going to say the same thing about using your app. It's really about knowing what your temperatures are, when's the last average frost date, when does frost arrive, and kind of keeping track of that, which I've figured out, you know, in my head because I've been here for so long. But that's what you're really looking for. Zone 7 doesn't tell you anything when to plant radishes or when to start your warm crops. Or how long your garden can go. You have to know what your weather patterns are. But that sort of becomes a barrier too, because somewhere out there, that myth is out there that people are searching for their zone and trying to do what's for that zone. And it's a guideline, but to me, it becomes a barrier, you know. And now, I don't know if you've noticed your weather patterns different, but whatever is causing, you know, the weather changes, we're getting a shorter spring. The heat comes quicker here and it's lasting longer. So I can grow now into November.
Yeah, we don't have the tornadoes as much anymore.
Yeah.
At least it's because we used to have. We've been, you know, the capital of tornadoes for a long time, but the past, I don't know how long it's been since that last big one that came through. That was 10 years ago. I think that was the 10-year anniversary recently. Yeah, I think the biggest valuable thing about zones is knowing, like, the biggest way I use zone is for knowing how hardy something is. So if you're buying a tree, it'll say it's hardy to zone 3, 4, 5, whatever.
Right.
That's really the only thing I find valuable about zones. I think that might be the way, because we don't have anything about zones in the app right now, but if we add a feature, it'll be related to that, just helping determine
fruit trees, berry bushes, things like that.
Well, right. Yeah. And that, I mean, that just goes along with the cold hours. Like certain trees need so many cold hours for the winter so that they go through their dormant phase and then they can produce and fruit. And then certain trees like citrus can't be grown up where I am because they don't want any cold hours below whatever 40 degrees and frost and freezes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a good benefit. I was just going to say there's a lot to learn about gardening, but I'm still learning after even 30 years. And like, if people just get started, you quickly learn all the important things, and then you have that success going, and then you can kind of branch out into other things and kind of keep experimenting and keep learning. I don't want people to feel like you need to go to college to grow a garden and you have to have a degree and you have to know everything. You can know very little, but you're taking care of sun, earth, water, fertilizer, and then you're putting the seeds in, and you're going to get something. You know, nature's been doing this for, well, forever, from the beginning. We more so could mess it up if we try too hard versus just getting started and kind of let nature do its thing, you know. And it's very rewarding. You know, I really target the people that have not done this before. I think if they can get out and try it, if it's just in containers or root pouches or fabric pots, grow some basil, grow some cilantro, grow herbs, add them into your chicken dish. People are going to want to do more.
Yep, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
You know, one of the cool things about gardening too is there's different cycles of it. So you have the cycle of a plant like lettuce, where maybe it's over 50 to 60 days that plant lives before it gets too hot or whatever. We also have these longer term cycles for things like peach trees. So in Oklahoma, peaches are hard to grow. So we have a big peach tree out here that for the past 2-3 years, it really hasn't produced much, but this year it is. So it gives you, again, that aspect into better appreciation for things, because like you said, things don't always go the way that you hope. A lot of things are out of your control, especially with trees, where your harvest is going to be very dependent on the weather conditions and how many chill hours you had that winter, and if we had a late frost and if we had a fake frost and all that kind of stuff. And you know, that's one of the things I like about it, because we are going to have a bumper crop of peaches, and I'm going to be so excited getting all those off the tree.
Yes.
And that is going to be such a cool feeling. And it's the same feeling I have when we get a whole bunch of spinach out of the garden, or a basket of peas, or anything that we get out of it. And that's ultimately, I think, what brings me back into gardening, is that sustainability of happiness, if you will, not just the food, but also just there's always something new. It's always so fun watching Carrie light up like a little kid when there's a new bug in the garden. And she's out there like trying to get a picture of it and like trying to figure out, well, what bug is this? We haven't seen this one before. And you know, she's like a kid again out there. It's fun to watch. You know, I think that's one of the things I love about gardening too, is like you said, there's always something new to learn. There's always things that are changing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the kind of what you were describing, and I was thinking about it too, is the garden brings me joy. So if you ask me, like, why do I have a garden? Probably could be summed up because it brings me joy. But it's that joyfulness of bumper crop of peaches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to can my peaches. I'm going to freeze my peaches. I'm going to be sick of peaches at the end of the year. But it's a good memory. Or I'm just having a good time hunting this bug down, and you call the kids over and look at this one and look at that one. And this is probably my mental health field coming into play, but that's what life is about, like, is engaging the world that's presented to us and being caught in the moment and all your senses being focused on that. When I transitioned out of mental health, I really wasn't getting burned out, loved working with patients, but there was a lack of structure and routine. And I think I talked to you about this before when we were, doing my podcast. You can't the patients that were coming through didn't have a lot of structure and routine. So you can't just come in and get therapy and then maybe take medicine and then you feel better. You have to incorporate a healthy structure and routine. Not that they were doing anything wrong or they were doing things that weren't healthy. There's not a whole lot available sometimes to people. So if you can create a healthy routine for yourself, you can kind of break the cycle of something that's not helping you, incorporate gardening or getting out into nature or just breaking that cycle in some way and doing something positive. It goes a long way, in addition to therapy and medication if you need it, but it goes a long way for all human beings, I think, to just have a routine that brings them joy. And for me, it's certainly gardening. It's having this conversation with you guys, talking about gardening. It's, it's just, joyful.
Well, we feel the same way, Gary. I think that's the perfect way
Yeah.
to end this talk. I mean, I think that summarizes exactly why we love gardening too. It brings us joy.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, you want to tell everyone where they can find you?
Yeah, you can actually find me on Instagram under The Rusted Garden. I put out the 1-minute reels all the time about different things that you can do in a garden, give you some ideas and inspiration. I have a YouTube channel called The Rusted Garden or The Rusted Garden Homestead. And I do have a book too, if people are looking for a book. It's called The Modern Homestead Garden, Growing Self-Sufficiency in Any Size Backyard, which is a lot of words, but that's what the editors wanted. But it's sort of the catchphrase now of self-sufficiency. But it really, to me, it's learning how to grow food, find that joy, and just take something from your kind of little homestead and bring it into the house and incorporate it into your dinner.
Well, I highly recommend y'all check out Gary. Like I said, I've watched him since we first started gardening. He's one of the few channels I still watch in the gardening space. And you got to check him out. And I'm definitely going to check your book out. I'm excited to read that, Gary.
That is exciting.
Yeah, I don't know how I missed that, but I'm definitely going to order that when we're done with this call. So
very appreciated. And I had a wonderful time. And it's good timing too, because one of those rainstorms are coming in and I see lightning. So I'm probably going to lose my internet, as that always happens.
Well, also I want to mention that we were on Gary's podcast. Gary has a podcast with Callie Kim called Gardening Coast to Coast, and we had an episode with them a few weeks ago. So check that out and check their podcast out as well. Another great resource. So thank you again, Gary. We really enjoyed the conversation and look forward to talking to you again someday. Sure,
we can talk about the weather app.
Yeah, I think we have a conversation to have about weather algorithms now.
Yeah,
so
watering, all of that fun stuff.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
Yep. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.